Hi, I'm Mark Rush Jr., partner at Prodigy Search. As part of our Prodigy Search Presents interview series, we are speaking with a few members of our Diversity and Inclusion Board of Advisors. They play a major role advocating for change within their organizations and the sports and entertainment industries as well. Our goal with this mini-series is to continue to educate and provide guidance to sports and entertainment leaders as our D&I board members share valuable insights and best practices. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce Regina Ford. Regina, hi. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Mark. It's great to be here.
So over the last few years and during COVID, so this is some recent developments in your career, you held senior D&I roles at the Pacific Science Center and you're currently at Amazon. Your prior roles and your longtime successful careers have included places like MGM, Caesars, and Northwestern, which we'll get into as well during the course of our conversation. And the ranges of roles have been recruiting, community affairs, but obviously a big chunk of it being D&I, and that's currently what you're focusing on, obviously. So with the Northwestern Mutual, we'll get into some of the recruiting and the other experiences throughout healthcare as well. So again, thank you for being here today. You've added a lot to our D&I board over the last few years, and one of them in particular is this idea of a D&I toolkit. So you've talked with our D&I board of advisors, you've instructed and frankly educated the Prodigy Search team here about this D&I toolkit notion. And so from the beginning, it was trying to understand what the value is and having a central hub or a repository of sorts for all of your diversity and inclusion needs, right? Your articles, your frequently asked questions, best practices, your data and research, which you and I have talked about a lot so you can track things. Talk about the idea of a D&I toolkit. Why is that important?
Great question, Mark. I appreciate it. So first of all, I think the first thing that we need to ground ourselves in is the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion has real and large positive impacts on the profitability of companies and organizations and on the outcomes of organizations overall. So regardless if you're for-profit, nonprofit, or just an organization of people and thought, maybe an athletic organization, time and time again, surveys and different studies have shown that those teams and organizations with more diverse team members drive better results. And so I think McKinsey is probably most well known for their series of Diversity Matters. And that series shows that for publicly traded companies, and they studied over 15 countries over a number of years, those with more women in their executive team produce something like 25% more profitability than the other teams. And that was their most recent study done in 2019. And then also, if those executive teams have more ethnic and ethnicity diversity, they produce over 36% more profitability. So the first thing I want to say in answering about like why a toolkit is because it actually does matter. It matters in your profitability, matters in your outcomes if you really are working through a diverse set of team members. So with that in mind, a toolkit is essential to start your DEI journey as an organization. So that toolkit might end up being a repository on your SharePoint or something of that nature, but having a structure that shows all of the DEI initiatives that your organization is undertaking in the 4 major boxes of DEI is critical. You have employee representation where you try to get more diverse employees or team members. That's really critical. But there's also like the customer diversity, meaning what products or services are you producing? And are you producing that for a diverse set of consumers, right? So even as a sports organization, you have customers and they're very diverse. Like a lot of different people watch football, watch basketball, tennis, et cetera. So are you producing that in a way that they all consume it with, great value? And then there's also your supplier diversity. Everyone has a chain of people that they partner with to provide their services or products. So are you working with a diverse set of those suppliers, or are you just using the same group of suppliers you've always used who may only be from one demographic group or one group and not representative of the communities that you're serving? And then the last one is your community outreach. That's a lot, right? So a toolkit orders exactly what are you doing? What are you actioning under each of those 4 boxes? And by having a toolkit, it does 2 major things. One, it gives consistency for everyone who's working on those initiatives. You don't want someone dabbling off the side of their desk doing community outreach and building relationships one way, and another team doing it totally different, not following similar steps, not gathering similar information. Somebody is doing one thing with their recruiting practices and someone else is doing the other. You want a common agreed set of steps and an order and an organization to how you're approaching diversity, equity, inclusion. Toolkit really does serve that purpose. And then the other big impact from using a toolkit is that it allows scale. You can scale quickly across regions, globally, different offices when you have a common set of understanding of how to approach something, and being able to scale out your activities quickly. So any new hire can come on board and say, oh, I see what they're doing. I see what the real action is here behind this DEI commitment. I see what the strategy is. That's what a toolkit allows you to do.
Do you, and to that point, you talked about the differences in profitability, performance, et cetera. When you do have something like this, do most organizations not have this? Do you feel like this idea is still new because there's no organization to it? There's no, I mean, they have ideas, or they might have initiatives, or they might have, ERGs, but they haven't brought it all together. Is that a fair? I mean, that's a sweeping statement, but do you think most organizations, sports, entertainment, or otherwise, are kind of missing a toolkit of some kind?
I wouldn't say most, but a lot are. Okay. And what I would also say is most organizations need some type of help to understand what is actually going to be effective for authentic change. Many organizations are truly committed to being more representative and to wanting to build a sense of inclusion internally for themselves and their colleagues, and then externally for people they're trying to employ or whoever they're serving. But they don't know what that means. They don't know, how do I actually make this real instead of performative? What can I actually do to move our DEI commitment from a statement on our website to real action where we're impacting positively, being more inclusive in our recruiting, removing barriers and removing bias from that process, intentionally looking for ways to partner with organizations from all different backgrounds and all different gender identifications, et cetera. Oftentimes organizations struggle at, are we doing the right thing? And, let's pilot something and see if it's working. But if you don't have the structure of a toolkit or some type of similar kind of a structure that holds a repository of exactly what you're doing, tracks the data there, gives common insights, you run the risk of having a ton of different activities happening with no trackable results. No one place to say, okay, we tried 15 things, now what? What worked? What didn't work? How are you saying it works? Because did you measure it? Where were we at the beginning? What were the success metrics? And then where are we at the end? So I do feel like tons of organizations struggle with that. They struggle with understanding how data-driven DEI work really is and how to track that data effectively within their organization, because everyone has to start from scratch at some point. And a toolkit can help walk you through and say, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this practice before, but I see it's on this person's toolkit. Let's include that on ours. So I think it's a really essential exercise to go through to at least score if you're covering what's essential for your organization.
You talked about at the beginning of our call, the idea of the customer, the community, the partners and vendors. Like, it's got to be the holistic part of the equation. It can't just be on recruiting and hiring. But since we have that common background, and your earlier career included a lot of roles in recruiting and HR, major companies, like we talked about MGI, Northwestern, Caesars, before becoming a D&I person that has still recruiting and HR elements under them. So can you talk about the kind of the $1 million question I always ask people, which is the focus that recruiters and HR professionals need to put on D&I strategies? They're on the front lines, right? When it comes to hiring and shaping the people makeup of an organization, the HR and recruiters are on the front lines of that. So why is their focus, why are their approaches and strategies, why are they so important?
I think it's another really critical question, Mark. So I'm glad you've asked it. No one, in my opinion, has more accountability to truly be trained as a DEI practitioner than human resources and the recruiters, talent acquisition, and everyone within that talent acquisition community, recruiters, sourcers, et cetera. And I'll tell you why. It's not the only part of the puzzle, as I mentioned, but that primary box of employee representation is huge. And it's where most organizations start. Because if you have a lot of really great relationships with vendors who are diverse, or you have a lot of great relationships with community partners who represent diverse populations, but inside your organization, you're all something, all male, all white, and yet you're expecting people to understand and believe that you're committed to a diverse set of people from different backgrounds, languages, perspectives. That's incongruous. So most people really want to ensure that they are attracting and hiring top talent from across the board. And the hiring can only be done by the recruiting team. It can only be done by your talent acquisition community. And human resources is a key partner in that, in terms of the employment laws and the structure that you need to follow in order to remove bias from your hiring practices. And so I always say, if you're a recruiter and it's your responsibility to deliver to your hiring managers the best talent possible for the requisitions that you have open, you cannot say you're doing that if you're only recruiting from one population. You cannot say, oh, I've delivered you the best and the top talent available for your role, if you don't have women in that pipeline, and lots of them. If you don't have people who speak a different language, veterans, if you don't have Black, Latinx, if you don't have Native American, Indigenous candidates that were screened appropriately to match that requisition, how can you say you're delivering the best? You can't. Not with authenticity, you can't. So it's part of your obligation and your requirement as a recruiter to make sure that your pipeline is as diverse as you can get it. And here's the great thing, it benefits you, right? Like, it benefits you. Like, essentially recruiting is selling. And I've spent, over 10 years of my human resources background has been in talent acquisition, either as a recruiter or as a leader, making these kind of strategies. And what I would say is you're selling your roles to people who are super talented and have the opportunity to take them. So as a salesperson, you're opening up, your demographics and your regions. It's like being a salesperson and you're only, selling cars in the state of California, right? That's it. For some historical reasons, right? You've been selling cars to California and you're good at it. You're really good at it. And someone tells you, well, you know what? There are actually really great customers who want your exact cars in Nevada, in New York, in, in Georgia, all over the United States, all over the world, in fact. And so for you to open up your practices and look through your entire hiring funnel and remove bias that might have been causing only people from California to respond to your sales ads for your cars, now you're selling cars all across the world. So it behooves you to do it as a recruiter. And there is an obligation, I believe, that you have as, the screening person for your hiring managers to do so as well.
Yeah, listen, they/we, right? If you're the gatekeepers to that and you're slowing that down, you're mucking it up for the entire organization, right? If you're not being inclusive in your recruiting practices, where you search, how you search, who you interview, who you pass along, well, it's not going to get down the funnel to the rest of the organization as you look to hire anywhere from a junior level position to a C-suite role. The gatekeepers need to do a better job, bottom line.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot over the years, and our team has, when we've worked on recruiting for DEI roles within sports entertainment, which are brand new, right, are very fresh. So therefore, we have to look outside of our industry, generally speaking, when we're trying to recruit to our industry. And so the question I have is, outside of the sports space, right, outside of teams and leagues and agencies within sports, what are the main issues? What are the main DEI issues that exist within gambling, hotels, and hospitality? Are they the same? Are they different? I believe you guys are probably all ahead of what we do in sports, but what are the differences between the gambling, hotels, and hospitality and sports when it comes to DEI?
That is another interesting question, Mark. I think there are both similarities and differences from the sports industry to gambling and hotel industry or hospitality. The gambling and hospitality industries are built on decades of nepotism. Like in the United States, it just started out with whoever had the funding could buy a hotel, buy a casino, build one, and then they could just fill it like pretty much unregulated, just with whomever they wanted, friends, families, and whoever in their mind and with all their unconscious biases, they felt would fit certain types of roles, right? And so still to this day, you'll find that that problem persists. It shifts from one generation to the next, meaning that you have entry-level positions that are more diverse, and the senior level positions nearly completely lack all diversity. And the ownership, for sure, of hotels and casinos completely lacking all diversity. You see that in sports. So who's on the field, who's on the court in sports, probably pretty diverse. Unless the barriers to entry of that sport are super expensive. Soccer, you can put a ball anywhere. Very diverse players. Same thing with basketball court, you can shoot hoops anywhere, you can put a hoop up. Same thing with football, American football, you could throw that football anywhere in your fields and rural areas and cities, you could do whatever you want. And there's not many barriers to entry. There's just a few costs as you get more and more competitive, but at those points, it's when you tend to have sponsors. So the player is very diverse, but who can own a sports team, right? Who are the coaches making the decisions of who they're selecting on their team and who they're selecting as other coaches, right? Now there's barriers to entry. The same thing with hotels and casinos. Who owns those hotels and casinos is very homogenous. It is not diverse at all. And there's lots of barriers to entry to get into that leadership club. So, I definitely found in my years, which is about 7 in the gambling, they call it gaming, but the gambling and hotel industry, it was very much a problem. It's the problem to this day. Now, I will say casinos, gambling, hotel industries are much more advanced in data than most people take them for. They have a wealth of, their whole operations are data. They're gathering data through beakers, beepers and different beacons and lights that gather information as people come through doors, right? Like you're coming in the door and you think you're just walking into Bellagio. Oh, you're being scanned. What is on your phone? What are your preferences? What do you like? Which doors are you entering in? So they know which doors are the most used, and that's where they put their big advertisements. So if you're using that northwest door the most, if that's where most of the traffic is coming in, that's where you're going to see Britney Spears. That's where you're going to see J-Lo being advertised, right? So they're watching and they're gathering data on your gambling habits, your eating habits, your shopping habits. However, when it comes to diversity, it's the same struggle. You lift up the hood and you might see a casino, they do diversity reports annually, many of them. They have really robust commitments, huge supplier diversity programs where their construction has to be, the construction of their hotels and different rooms have to be a certain percent filled with, Black owned, women owned, LGBTQIA plus owned, veteran owned construction companies, deep commitments there. But ultimately where they say, oh, we're X hotel and casino and we have 40% of our employees are BIPOC, right? They're Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Yeah, but 99% of that 40% diversity is front desk, is housekeeping, is, the dealers at the table, custodial facilities. And you go to, let's go to the senior leadership positions for accounting, for marketing, for legal. You could probably count the BIPOC people and women on your hand. And that's no exaggeration. It lacks that much diversity. So that's the struggle. At the leadership levels, nearly no diversity. And then push it further and say, okay, who owns these operations? Who ultimately can make decisions? Nothing, like very little diversity at all. So I find the comparisons with the sporting industry to be, very meaningful in those aspects. It's not just diversity on its own of representation, it's diversity across those 4 boxes, including customer diversity, community relationships, supplier diversity, and then where does that diversity sit? We need that diversity in the ownership suite. We need that diversity with the senior leaders who are making the ultimate long-term strategic decisions for those organizations.
In that answer you just gave, you mentioned among all the other groups, you mentioned two groups in particular. You mentioned veterans and LGBTQ. And I remember, I want to say it was from your time at Caesars, but you correct me if I'm wrong. But I remember reading years ago your profile and your bio, and I remember that clearly your focus was going to be on women and people of color. I got it. But then you also said veterans and LGBTQ were populations that you were focused on as well, which again, I'm bringing them up as this should be a holistic discussion. So can you talk about that it's the wide ranging groups, because we've had that debate, and you know that because you've been part of it, people with disabilities and so on and so forth. But the veterans and LGBTQ beyond, the ones that people focus on, how has that gone throughout your career? How Caesars or MGM, et cetera, growing and focusing on, whether it be recruiting or otherwise, inclusiveness, equity for those two groups and populations?
I feel like these days, most organizations understand that when DEI professionals are talking about paying particular attention to give voice to the voiceless and to ensure that we are proactively seeking to bring in colleagues and build teams with a diverse set of people, that it goes beyond race and ethnicity, which are completely man-made concepts, right? Because we're all, as humans, like genetically exactly the same, right? So there's that construct. And also like gender identification. I think most organizations understand that it goes beyond that. And I'll say the reason why it's really important is because there are lots of people with neurodiverse challenges, sensory challenges, who really struggle to get job opportunities in fields that they love because the hiring practice is not set up for them. There are people who have hearing problems or are fully deaf, people who have sight problems or are fully blind, who can't go through the traditional hiring process with applications and resumes because they don't have that provision from the organization. And then when it comes to actually interviewing, the organization didn't think through, okay, well, I said on our website, we really embrace all people with different disabilities or learning differences to apply, but now I don't have a Braille keyboard for this person to respond to this, online assessment we're giving everyone. And that's what equity is actually about. It's like this presumption that, okay, we're just going to have an exercise and everyone has the same keyboard, so everybody should be able to do the same thing, right? We gave everybody, we don't care what your race is, we don't care what, your sexual orientation is, you got a keyboard. But how well is that blind person going to do on a traditional keyboard when it's not a Braille keyboard? That's equity. Like, think about it. Think about these different groups. And a lot of people don't think about veterans who have some of the most advanced skills that you could name across the board for any hiring opportunity. So if you're looking for people who have an order and organization to everything they do, project management skills, deep skills and analysis, data analysis skills, that's our veteran population. But they have come from a set of organizations that use their own nomenclature and their own references in a certain way for certain concepts. And you're not providing even a connection from within your own organization of a veteran who you already have, as an employee. You're not even providing them a connection to help translate some of those military concepts into non-military or civilian speak for their resume, for them to be able to present what those skills are and what they've actually learned. So there are a lot of these groups that we shouldn't just include on like a flyer or just we're committed
to together, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have to have nuance to the diverse populations that you're trying to service. That even like if you're digging into Indigenous and Native American candidates for certain opportunities, there is very little access to consistent cell phone and internet service on our traditional American reservations. And if you haven't been to one, go to one. Go to a reservation, go to Lumbee Reservation in North Carolina, go somewhere where you're actually on the reservation and see what the limitations are for their internet access and their phone access. And then understand what you have to provide really amazing, talented candidates in those populations in order for them to excel and fill the roles that you have available. And in the sporting industry, I couldn't think of anything that is more relevant to ensuring that these different populations have that opportunity, because sports is a place of dreams. Like that is, you know, the place where we see that American dream concept happen over and over again. Someone from any background, economic status, providing the most amazing talent that we all celebrate. Like, you got to be able to give them the opportunity, though, to even be a part of the conversation for consideration.
To your point, sports is the common language. It's a common ground, regardless of how we look, what we, you know, how we talk. I mean, you name it, how we present ourselves. It's you're absolutely right, and that should go beyond the playing field. And this is what we're talking about right today. That should translate to the front offices and the business functions of these organizations too. So this was an absolutely wonderful conversation. We've picked your brain a ton over the last, I guess, few months, if not a couple of years, on a number of topics. But I really enjoyed getting the chance to talk one-on-one today, presenting everything you had to say to us beyond just our D&I board to everybody else now. And so they get to see your areas of expertise and learn a little bit more about you. So thank you again for your time today and continued success. Please give my best to the family. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. It's been delightful. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.